There are nights in sports when the score is not the whole story. There are tournaments where the trophy tells you who won, but the crowd tells you what actually mattered. And in Berlin, at the Berlin Open, that is exactly what happened. The final was supposed to be the grand stage, a WTA 500 title on grass, a major stop on the road through the season, a showcase at the Steffi Graf Stadion in Germany, with elite players, a trophy ceremony, and all the polish that comes with professional tennis. But when Jessica Pegula and Linda Noskova walked onto the court for the championship match, something was impossible to ignore. The seats were not full, not even close. The same stadium that had been alive with noise, flags, and emotion just one day earlier looked strangely quiet. The energy had vanished. The crowd that had turned Berlin into a Filipino tennis festival was gone. And the reason was not complicated. Alex Eala was no longer in the draw. That is the real story from Berlin, not just who lifted the trophy, not just who won the final. The real story is how a 21-year-old Filipino wildcard changed the atmosphere, changed the ticket demand, changed the conversation, and then after one semi-final loss, exposed just how much of the tournament's momentum had been built around her. When the Berlin Open began on June 14, 2026, Eala was not supposed to be the center of the tournament. She entered as a wild card, ranked 35th in the world, with expectations that were respectful but limited. She was a promising player, yes, a rising name, yes, but in a draw filled with established stars, the assumption was that she would make her appearance, compete hard, and probably leave before the biggest weekend. That assumption collapsed almost immediately. Her first match already carried signs that something unusual might be forming. Against Donna Vekic, a former Wimbledon semi-finalist, Eala had to survive pressure. She was pushed into a difficult finish, even facing 0-40 in the final game. That is the kind of moment where young players can blink. That is the kind of moment where a match can slip away. But Eala held her nerve, fought through the danger, and closed the door. It was not yet a headline-shaking result, but it was a warning. Then came the round of 16, and that was when Berlin changed. Across the net was Elena Rybakina, the world number 2, a former Wimbledon champion and one of the most dangerous grass court players in the women's game. This was not a soft matchup. This was not a fortunate draw. This was supposed to be the point where the wildcard story ended. Instead, Eala won 7-5, 6-4. That result did more than move her into the next round. It jolted the tournament awake. Beating the world number 2 on grass is not a minor upset. It is a statement. It tells the locker room that the player is not just surviving the draw, she is threatening it. And for Filipino fans watching from around the world, it was the moment that turned interest into urgency. Suddenly, Berlin was not just another stop on the tennis calendar. Berlin was where Alex Eala was making history. Online, the reaction was immediate. Filipino fans celebrated the win as the biggest of her career. People who had not planned to attend the tournament began looking at flights. Those already in Europe started moving schedules around. Fans in London, Paris, Rome, Madrid, and beyond understood what was happening. This was not just a nice run. This was a breakthrough, and then Eala backed it up again. In the quarterfinal, she faced Elina Svitolina, the world number 8, a veteran player with experience, discipline, and a game built to handle pressure. Once again, Eala did not shrink. She won in straight sets, 6-3, 6-4. That victory put her into the semifinals of a WTA 500 event on grass. It also made history. She became the first player from Southeast Asia to reach that stage at this level on grass. It guaranteed her a move into the world's top 30, and it transformed her from a surprise story into the emotional center of the tournament. By then, the Filipino presence inside the stadium was impossible to miss. Flags were everywhere. Fans wore national colors. The chants for Alex rolled through the venue until they became part of the tournament's identity. This was not a scattered group of supporters making polite noise. This was a mobilized community. And the ticket numbers started reflecting it. After Eala beat Svitolina, demand for the semifinal surged. Organizers looked at the interest around her next match and realized they were dealing with something bigger than a standard ticket bump. The demand was overwhelming. Reports described semifinal sales moving so fast that organizers had to respond in real time. Extra seating areas were considered or opened. More security was brought in. Sections that had not been expected to carry that level of traffic suddenly mattered. This is where the business lesson began. Tennis tournaments often market stars. They promote rankings, rivalries, national appeal, and big names. But what happened in Berlin was different. Eala did not just bring tennis fans. She brought a community. She brought a diaspora. She brought people who were willing to cross borders, change work plans, spend money, stand in lines, and turn a semifinal into an event. There were fans who traveled hundreds of miles. Some came from major European cities. Others came from much farther away, including Australia. Lines formed around the Steffi Graf Stadion. Supporters waited for hours, carrying flags and wearing the colors of the Philippines. One fan, a nurse from London, reportedly took 3 days off work and flew in just to see Eala play live after following her career since she was a teenager. That is not normal tournament behavior. That is emotional investment. Local media noticed. German outlets paid attention to the Filipino crowds. Cameras showed up outside the venue. The WTA and tournament organizers, who may not have expected this kind of atmosphere in Berlin, were forced to recognize that Eala's presence had changed the commercial and cultural weight of the event. And then came the semifinal. Across the net stood Linda Noskova, a 20-year-old Czech player who already had a difficult history with Eala that season. Earlier in the year at Indian Wells, Noskova had beaten her badly 6-2, 6-love. That mattered. Matchups matter in tennis. Styles matter. Confidence matters. And Noskova's game had already proven uncomfortable for Eala. In Berlin, that problem returned. Noskova served with authority. She produced 9 aces. She forced short returns. She took control early in rallies and did not allow Eala to settle into the rhythm that had carried her through Rybakina and Svitolina. The Czech player struck 33 winners and kept pressing. Eala, meanwhile, looked physically limited. There were signs that something around the shoulder or elbow was bothering her. Whether it was pain, tightness, or fatigue from the week, her return game did not have the bite it needed. Against a player serving as aggressively as Noskova, that is a dangerous combination. The match was over in 1 hour and 9 minutes. 6-2, 6-4, just like that, the run ended. Eala walked off the court without the trophy, but not without the moment. She had beaten the world number 2. She had beaten the world number 8. She had reached the biggest semifinal of her career at WTA 500 level. She had secured a projected career best ranking inside the top 30. She had earned significant prize money for the week, with the reported figure later placed at 57,395 euros. And she had done all of it as a wild card on grass in front of a crowd that had turned her matches into something bigger than tennis. The crowd reaction after the loss was telling. There was no ugly scene, no rage, no disrespect toward Noskova. The supporters stood. Many were emotional. They applauded Eala, acknowledging not just the match, but the entire week. Then they left. Quietly, one by one, the same fans who had filled the stadium for her run made their way out. Their tournament had ended when hers did. They had traveled to Berlin for Alex Eala. They had bought tickets for Alex Eala. They had shouted themselves hoarse for Alex Eala. And once she was out, the emotional reason for staying was gone. The next day, the final exposed it. Jessica Pegula and Linda Noskova played for the Berlin title, but the atmosphere did not match the occasion. The crowd was thin. The applause was polite, not thunderous. The stands that had been alive with Filipino flags during Eala's run were now marked by empty patches. The contrast was sharp enough that it became part of the story itself. Organizers reportedly tried to lift attendance. Discounts were offered. Tickets were made available to local schools. Efforts were made to fill the venue and restore the image of a proper final day showcase. But the wave that had arrived for Eala did not simply transfer itself to the championship match. That is the point. The Filipino fans were not just buying tennis, they were buying the chance to witness one of their own history. When that chance disappeared, so did the crowd. For the WTA, that is both a warning and an opportunity. The warning is simple. Do not misunderstand why people are showing up. A packed semifinal does not automatically mean the entire tournament has suddenly become must-see entertainment for the broader public. Sometimes the draw has one player who is carrying an audience that is personal, national, and emotional. If organizers fail to understand that, they will misread the numbers. But the opportunity is even bigger. Eala's run showed that the Filipino diaspora can be a powerful force in global tennis. This was not limited to fans in the Philippines. This was a network spread across Europe and beyond, ready to mobilize when the moment felt historic. The same lesson had reportedly appeared earlier at other tournaments, including the Australian Open, Dubai, and Rome. When Eala is placed in a meaningful match, Filipino fans do not treat it casually. They show up, and when they show up, they can change the economics around a match. They can influence ticket demand. They can create a television-friendly atmosphere. They can turn an outside court problem into a center court necessity. They can make organizers rethink scheduling, seating, promotion, and fan engagement. That is why Berlin mattered beyond the scoreline. The final still happened. Jessica Pegula lifted the trophy. Noskova completed a strong week by reaching the title match after ending Eala's run. The tournament had its champion. But the memory that lingered was not only the champion's celebration, it was the visual difference between the Eala semi-final and the final that followed. That difference told everyone something important. Alex Eala had become a draw, not someday, not hypothetically, not only in the Philippines, right now in Europe at a WTA 500 tournament on grass. She moved people, she moved tickets, she moved attention, and she seemed to understand what the week meant. After the tournament, she posted a message of gratitude, saying in essence that the emotions of the week were difficult to capture, that her heart was full, and that Berlin had become deeply special to her. It was a simple response, but it fit the moment. She had lost the semifinal, but she had gained something that cannot be measured only by ranking points or prize money. She gained proof. Proof that her career is entering a different stage. Proof that she can beat top-ranked opponents. Proof that she can produce major wins on grass. Proof that the crowd behind her is not symbolic. It is real, organized, passionate, and willing to travel. That changes expectations. Before Berlin, she was a wildcard ranked 35th, a talented player still trying to establish herself among the upper tier. After Berlin, she was a player projected to enter the top 30, a semi-finalist at a major WTA 500 grass event, and the first Southeast Asian to reach that mark on the surface. Those are concrete achievements. Those are milestones that change how tournaments view a player, but they also raise the stakes. Because once a fan base proves it can move like this, organizers have to adapt. They have to understand that court assignment matters, match timing matters, ticket allocation matters, local outreach matters. If a Filipino star is playing in a city with a sizable diaspora population nearby, that is not a side note. That is a planning issue. That is a revenue issue. That is an atmosphere issue. Berlin found that out in real time. The semifinals became the event people wanted to attend. The final became a reminder that not all attendance is transferable. If a tournament builds its late week energy around one player's audience, it cannot assume that audience will remain once that player exits. That does not diminish Pegula's title. It does not take anything away from Noskova's win over Eala. Noskova earned that semifinal victory. Pegula earned the trophy. The tennis results stand on their own. But sports are not only results, sports are also emotion, identity, and timing, and Eala's week in Berlin hit all three. A young Filipino player stepped into a grass court draw as a wild card. She survived a tense opener. She beat a former Wimbledon champion ranked number 2 in the world. She beat a top 8 veteran in straight sets. She reached a historic semifinal. She forced a tournament to deal with sudden ticket demand. She filled the stadium with flags, chants, and fans who had crossed borders to see her. Then she ran into a difficult opponent, appeared physically hampered, and lost in straight sets. And after that, the crowd disappeared. That is not a small detail. That is the headline beneath the headline. The Berlin Open became a case study in how modern tennis audiences can form around identity as much as ranking. Eala did not need to be the highest seed. She did not need to be the tournament favorite. She needed a moment big enough for her supporters to believe history was happening. Once that happened, they came. Now the question is whether the WTA and tournament organizers will learn from it, because this is where the sport has to be smart. If Eala continues rising, if she continues beating top players, if she continues giving Filipino fans a reason to travel and tune in, then she is not just another name in the draw. She is a market. She is a movement. She is a player whose matches can reshape the feeling of an event. Berlin showed the upside. It also showed the risk of underestimating what happens when that audience is emotionally tied to one competitor. The final gave out a trophy. Eala's run gave out a lesson, and in the long run, that lesson may matter more than one Sunday result. So now it becomes a question for the WTA, for tournament directors, for broadcasters, and for anyone trying to understand where tennis is headed. After what happened in Berlin, will they treat the Filipino diaspora as a major audience worth planning for, or will they wait until the next packed stadium forces them to learn the same lesson again? because Alex Eala's Berlin story did not end with a semifinal loss. It may have been the week the sport finally realized how many people were ready to follow her wherever the next breakthrough happens.